The next step in my science project is to complete the experimental design diagram, known as the EDD. This is where I record my variables and kind of make a plan to carry out my experiment. So this is just a plan. This is not, these are not the exact outcomes, any data, observations, nothing like that. It's just the plan. As my teacher explained it, kind of like the beginning of the recipe. How's it going to look? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the title. The title is really just a restatement of my purpose or my question in more of a scientific title. Later I'll have the opportunity to make a fun title that will catch the eyes of my observers, my evaluators at the science fair who wants to look at my project. It'll make people want to look at my project, but this is just a scientific title. So the way that is written is the effect of, and then I'll input my independent variable on my dependent variable. So in this case, I'm going to write the effect of. Now, what is my independent variable? It's the thing that I am changing. It is the only thing that I am manipulating during my project. That's going to be the length of the brain break. So the effect of brain break length, I'll say. I know that sounds funny. On, so this is my independent variable, on student focus. That is my dependent variable. And then the next thing I'm going to do on my EDD is just to rewrite my hypothesis. Sometimes you have to look back. That's why we have our packet. Let's see what I wrote. If I give my students a structured brain break of 5 minutes, then they will be able to focus longer. Okay. If I give my students a brain break of 5 minutes, I could reword that and say, if I give my students a 5-minute brain break, that might sound better. If I give my students a brain break of 5 minutes, then they will be able to focus longer. Okay, so there's my scientific title and my hypothesis. So my independent variable, the thing that I am going to change through my experiment, is the length of the brain break. Now my dependent variable is the thing that happens because I change the length of the brain break. So what happens when I don't give students a brain break? What happens when I give them 2 minutes brain break? And what happens when I give them a 5-minute brain break? These are things that I do not know yet, but what I know is what I'm expecting to find is how long they can focus. So that is my dependent variable. It depends on, the results depend on how long of a brain break I give them. So the dependent variable, that's like the results. I change the length of the brain break, and then what happens. So the dependent variable is what happens. So it is the, I will say, time students can focus. Now, obviously, some of my students are just more capable of focusing for longer periods of time than others. That's just human nature. That's how we are. So I will have to take that into consideration when I'm checking my data also. So I may always have a consistent 5 students who are always paying attention no matter what. So I need to look at the majority of what is happening. Okay, the things that I am not going to change during the experiment are the structure of the brain break. So if I am saying I'm doing structured brain break, then I have to make sure that I'm doing the same type of brain break. I can't have one thing being wild and crazy and one thing being calm and, kind of quiet. I can't do that. Otherwise, I'm manipulating too many things. So the structure of the brain break needs to be the same. It's constantly the same. The students that I am observing that are part of this experiment, they have to be the same. I can't use a different group of students. Okay. And also the time of day is important. Students may behave differently after a brain break depending on what time of day it is. If I do the brain break in the morning, they may still be tired and they may be able to go ahead and sit and refocus because they haven't been in school all day. Or if it's the afternoon, they may be wide awake because they've been in school all day and, or tired because they've been in school all day and they just are ready to go home. So the time of day is important. Also the setting. So if I'm going to do this, I probably should do it just in my classroom because I need it to be consistent. If I try it in somebody else's classroom, it's not set up the same. The visual stimulations may not be the same. If I do it outside, that's definitely a different component. So I want to make sure that everything else in my experiment remains the same. The only thing that I want to change during my experiment is the length of the brain break. Okay, so I'm going to put classroom. That's going to be the same. Okay, so those are my constants. So my control group, if one exists, what I could do, if there's not generally scheduled time for brain breaks in my class, so I could use that as my control. The control is what normally happens. So if we normally try to make it through 45-minute lesson without doing a brain break, then that would be my control. So I could measure that first. So in fact, that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. So my control group is no brain break. There are many experiments that do not have a control group because there's not a norm. Some students are testing the effectiveness of different toothpastes. Well, we don't all use the same toothpaste. There's not a norm for which toothpaste is used, throughout society. So there's not going to be a control group for that. As in the case of the Mickey Science Fair project, if you viewed that PowerPoint on the Science Fair page, then you would see that Mickey is giving his plants different liquids besides just water. Well, generally, plants are given water to help them grow and thrive, right? So that would be the control group. So you want to think about what normally happens. If there is not a norm, then there is no control group, which is perfectly fine. Okay, so this chart down here could be deceiving. We are not using this to fill in our data. We are simply using this as a way to plan how we're going to take our data or record our data during our experiment. So the different independent variables, the different ways we're going to get rid of these words here, unit of measurement, because we're actually not, we could be measuring, but we're not. So my independent variables, so I'm going to have no brain break. I'm going to have a 2-minute brain break. My handwriting's getting a little messy, but it's okay because this is just my, my workbook. And then a 5-minute brain break. So even though there are 4 boxes down here for independent variable, I'm not actually making 4 different changes, so I don't need to fill in data for all of those parts. So that's fine. If I want to just shade it to block it off, knowing that I'm not putting anything else there, that's fine. Okay, so how am I going to measure the results of what I'm doing? So I'm going to measure starting when all the students are settled. I'm going to measure in time how long. Well, let's see. Sometimes you got to think about this to make sure that you're getting the information that you need. So I'm going to measure, let's see. So I want to see, okay, so I'm going to measure in time. I'm going to see how long the students collectively can go for, how much time they can continue to focus until, after their brain breaks. So my first trial, I'm going to do, I don't have anything to write here. Sometimes I might write, excuse me. Sometimes you just got to talk it through. Okay, so here's my independent variables. No brain break, 2-minute brain break, 5-minute brain break. I'm going to measure in time. So how long can my students maintain focus after the brain breaks or without a brain break? So without a brain break, I would start right away at the beginning of the lesson. Start from minute 1 and see how long they could go, okay? With the 2-minute brain break, I'm going to do it 20 minutes into the lesson and then time after that. And then my third trial, I'm going to do 5 minutes after 20 minutes of the lesson and see what can happen then. So I'm going to say, all right, so that's what I've got. I'm not going to do 4 trials. I have to at least do 3, right? So I have comparative data, but I'm going to cross off trial 4. This is just for, students who may want to do more than 3 trials. So at least do 3. That's all there is. So this is how we do our plan. It's not always perfect. You can hear that I'm having to work through it too to just make sure that I've got all the information to help me build and structure the way that my experiment is going to go. Like I said, this is my plan so that I have things in order. So that is the EDD, that is the variables section that is due to my teacher. So I'm going to go ahead and take this into my teacher and let my teacher go over it with me and make sure that I don't have any misconceptions or there's not any parts that need to be changed before I continue on with my experiment.